Everybody, thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about The Punisher. I want to give a big welcome and thank you to the Brockopp Side for being here in a video. It's the very first time he's appearing here on my channel, and I gotta say he's got one of the coolest channels I've found as far as other people that do the exact same thing as I do. He's got great movie reviews, unboxings, and all kinds of really great content on his channel, and I highly recommend you guys go check out his channel. He's also got one of the most unique and identifiable voices I've ever heard in this YouTube movie game. So we're going to be hearing from him in just a little bit, but you guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. And again, thank you again for being in the video. So here we are talking about the early 2000s The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane as Frank Castle, the Punisher, and John Travolta as our main villain, the leader and father of this very popular and rich crime family that deals with guns and drugs and all that kinds of stuff that you see in a movie like this. For those who don't know the story of Frank Castle, his family is killed, and that sends him on the warpath of becoming the Punisher. In this film, we see the movie start, and Frank Castle is an undercover agent, and they're dealing with an arms deal that ends up getting him killed. It's just obviously a fake, but there ends up being a death on the other side of this arms deal, and it turns out that the person who died on the opposite side of this was the son of John Travolta's character. Not too long after that, we see that Frank Castle is absolutely okay, and he is now retiring and is going to be going on a family vacation for a family reunion to Puerto Rico, where he's reunited with his father and his mother, and he goes with his wife and his son. And yeah, not too long into the film, for the convenience of the story, John Travolta and his people end up discovering that the person who supposedly died at the beginning of the film was actually an undercover agent named Frank Castle, which ends up sending them on a warpath to come and kill him and his entire family. After they kill his entire family and completely destroy him, though he somehow survives, Frank Castle starts his path of vengeance to go on and take out John Travolta and his entire family. What I'll say right now, before I get too deep into my thoughts on this movie, just to kind of give you guys a little bit context, is that this was one of the earlier R-rated films that I ever saw in theaters. A big thanks to my mom for taking me to see this movie, as well as a lot of the other R-rated films she allowed me to go watch. Outside of one scene where we see some boobies, my mom was pretty okay with me seeing things that had violence or language, because she just kind of trusted me on that level, and she knew that I'm a huge Marvel fan. Growing up as a kid, and if you've watched this channel for a while, it's no surprise that Star Wars, Marvel, and DC are three things that I very much love, and I always have. So anytime that I was able to get a live-action adaptation of any of these characters, no matter how good or bad, I was always a fan. So when I saw this movie back in the day, I was absolutely blown away and absolutely loved it. And still to this day, I really like this movie. It's not a perfect movie, and there's things about it that don't really feel like a Punisher movie. In a lot of ways, you could take away the skull logo from the shirt and kind of just not have anything to do with the Punisher, and this movie could just be a good vengeance film, a good revenge film, because that's essentially what it is. And the Punisher element only really comes in here and there with the fact that his name is Frank Castle and that it kind of resembles the story of the Punisher, but there isn't really much that really, I feel, sets his character up with motivation to become the Punisher, other than a monologue he gives at the very end of the film. But outside of that, what I could say is I really like Thomas Jane as the Punisher. I think he plays the character really well, and I think when I look back at different actors who played certain roles from the comics that I really enjoy, Thomas Jane is kind of one of those that I feel is kind of overlooked, to be honest. I really enjoy his interpretation of the Frank Castle. I really enjoy this film on an overall level. Now, there are elements in certain performances that definitely don't work. There's some elements of the story that feel a little bit convoluted or very convenient for the story to kind of keep moving forward. But on an overall level, this is a good, crime syndicate kind of vengeance film that I feel kind of delivers on a lot of beats. And by the end of the film, I always really enjoy just seeing Frank Castle kick everybody's ass and light John Travolta's character on fire with his really terrible wig. I think the weakest performance, or the one performance in the film that just always stands out to me that I don't know how I feel about it, is John Travolta's character. He plays this character that is kind of creepy, a little bit off-putting, but he kind of feels like he has power in these situations. He kind of feels like somebody you don't want to fuck with, but sometimes his performance is a little cringe, and then there's times that it's actually believable. It's also a film that I can see people kind of finding a little bit forgettable at times. This is one of those movies that I can see you watching one time and maybe a few months later not necessarily remembering everything about it, because it's not absolutely mind-blowing and it doesn't have this huge list of fantastic characters that you really are deeply ingrained in. I find that most of my connection to this film is probably the longevity of it being in my life and, you know, how many times I've seen it. You know, it's a movie that I have seen quite a few times, because back in the day I used to just re-watch Marvel or DC films that existed just because those were the only ones. Now, before I continue my thoughts on this, let's go ahead and hear what the Brockopp Side had to say about this.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Cody from the Brockopp Side here to talk about the 2004 Punisher movie. Thanks again to Anthony for letting me come on your channel and talk about this wonderful piece of cinema here. So I had never seen this movie up until about like a month and a half ago, and I just finally decided to watch it for some reason. And yeah, my first reaction to it was, okay, this came out in 2004, but it just kind of feels like a 90s action movie that they made in the 90s when they forgot to release it for like 5 years, and they're like, oh, here it is. Maybe because it's R-rated and uses, you know, a lot of explosions and weird exotic locations for no reason. And also it takes the R-rated violence and doesn't really use it in like a dark and gritty way to kind of, you know, emphasize the tension of the scene. It's kind of just there for spectacle more than anything, especially with all kinds of like explosions and stuff going on in the finale and things like that. It just kind of feels more like, whoa, we can be R-rated and violent, but also have fun with it. Don't, you know, get all depressed and stuff. Which is honestly kind of ironic to me, because back in like the early 2000s when a lot of these kind of comic book movies were coming out, you know, for a while there they were kind of in this, oh, we gotta be dark and gritty and stylized so we can look all mature and stuff. You know, they did that for Daredevil, Batman, and a few other ones, but it's like, you don't do that for the Punisher, one of the darkest characters out there. It's like, what? But I do think Tom Jane does a good job of playing Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. You know, he does a good job for, you know, what he's given. I could totally see him as this hardened, gritty, kind of scary guy that, you know, is highly trained and deadly and, you know, lost all of his family because John Travolta got mad at him and then shot them all. And speaking of John Travolta, I don't know what it is about this man, but anytime I see him in any movie besides like Pulp Fiction and even the original Grease, it's like, I'm convinced that John Travolta is a trickster god living amongst us. But the movie does take a few creative liberties here and there, you know, like most comic book movies will do, but there are just a couple weird changes. I'm like, okay, why would you do that? Like how Frank Castle's family doesn't get killed in the middle of Central Park during some like mob crossfire stuff. Instead, they get killed on a vacation in Puerto Rico, which probably, you know, the movie didn't have the budget to go shoot in New York City, but they went to Puerto Rico, probably due to some kind of tax credit. And, you know, there are plenty of other weird little things throughout the movie, like the guitar guy that turns around and tries to kill Frank Castle, or the fact that Frank uses like a fake fire hydrant to rack up speeding tickets for John Travolta's wife as far as this big old scheme to where do you even get a fake fire hydrant is what I want to know. I don't want to take up too much time here, so my thoughts are not the best early 2000s Marvel movie ever, but, you know, it's kind of fun. You know, some of the action's enjoyable, but overall, we thankfully do have better Punisher adaptations out there, primarily on Netflix, so, you know, probably just stick to that one, but yeah, well, anyway, so check me out on the Brockopp Side. Thank you, Anthony, for having me on your channel, and yeah, I'm gonna leave now.
A big thanks to the Brockopp Side for being here in this video. Man, I gotta say again, love your voice. It's one of the most unique in the movie YouTube game, and I really do enjoy hearing you talk about things. And even though we have some differences as far as our opinions on this movie, I really appreciate where you're coming from, and you made me laugh quite a few times. I definitely have to agree with you on certain things that just don't make sense, like him using a fire hydrant to rack up John Travolta's wife's, you know, tickets to kind of like get her in trouble later on in the movie. Stuff like that has just felt like I was mentioning in the earlier part of my review as kind of convenient things that kind of push the narrative forward that are kind of convenient, but they don't necessarily ruin it for me. There are elements about this film that, yeah, just don't work on an overall level, and I can see if somebody's watching this today for the very first time that it may not be all that for them. Me watching this back in the day when it first came out, seeing it opening day in theaters, I was just all in just to be able to see a live-action Punisher movie that wasn't Dolph Lundgren, and the Dolph Lundgren one is just so distant from any of the other versions that we would get. Again, I really like Thomas Jane as the Punisher. I really enjoy the way he plays the character, and I really like John Travolta in this film, even though he makes me cringe at certain parts of the movie. This is a movie that I have a good time with some solid action, some great visuals, and, you know, though it can be a little bit dull and a little bit generic at times, I think at the core, I really enjoy it as a really great vengeance film. I think my biggest issue with this movie by the end of it is that it's not really much of a Punisher film, other than the fact that he wears the skull logo at a certain point, and then at the very end of the film he gives this monologue about being the Punisher, and that's how the movie ends. And outside of that very end moment, there really wasn't anything that I felt ever really gave him character motivation to become the Punisher. You know, his story throughout the course of this film is vengeance for his family, which totally made sense, but it never felt like it was ever going to push him to the next step of kind of taking this to a thing that he's going to do. You know, kind of taking this in the direction of something he wants to do and becoming the Punisher. Near the end of the movie, after he's done everything, he's going to kill himself, and then he just doesn't kill himself, and the next scene is him giving this monologue about the fact that he's going to be the Punisher, that he's going to go out and essentially be the character that we know from the comic books. But again, I think this movie in and of itself didn't really do anything to really set up that final monologue, other than us as fans being able to say, oh yeah, we know he becomes the Punisher, so this monologue makes sense. But I felt like the movie itself didn't set up really a motivation for him to actually have that monologue at the end, especially since the scene right before he was going to blow his brains out. But as a vengeance film that does star Frank Castle in the center of the story, I really do enjoy this movie with some really solid action and some visuals I do enjoy. One of the things that the Brockopp Side mentioned that I have to agree with is that there's just random stuff in this movie, like the scene with the guy who comes up with the guitar and sings a song to Frank Castle and then tries to kill Frank Castle shortly after and ends up getting killed. It's just so random and it doesn't really need to be in the movie. But what I will say to follow that up is that I've seen this movie so many times and I always just kind of enjoy that scene, even though I'm able to recognize that it doesn't really serve a purpose in the movie, outside of the fact that we know that, you know, John Travolta is sending various people to try to take out Frank Castle. And I've also seen the movie so many times that I can sing that song that guy plays without any problem. Every time I watch the movie, I kind of sing along with it, which again, I think just kind of leans into the fact that I have a slight bias with this movie just because I've seen it so many times and it came out when I was young and just really excited to see any sort of Marvel live action adaptation. But I still really enjoy this movie and I want to hear what you guys have to say. So a big thanks once again to the Brockopp Side for being here in this video. Loved hearing your take on the movie, man, and really look forward to continuing to see your channel grow and hopefully do more collabs as time goes on. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Hit that like button down below if you guys enjoyed this video. Comment your thoughts on this movie. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.